welcome to Careers and Coffee. I'm Lucy and I'm joined by my wonderful, fabulous co host, Charlotte Picker. Charlotte and I have a catch up every week over a cup of coffee, and our conversations always turn into something career specific. So we thought that we would launch a 6 week program on LinkedIn Lives, calling it a program, to invite you in to our conversations, to hear your thoughts too. And we're now 4 weeks in. How are we 4 weeks in already? So, Charlotte, first question I have for you: do you have your coffee?
Absolutely. As I
Cheers.
say, always.
And Charlotte, tell us, what we're going to be talking about today.
So she swallows her coffee. So we are going to be talking about the job application process. So we've already covered topics on CV and cover letter, and last week we discussed LinkedIn. But now it's the nitty gritty time to talk about job applications. And I don't know about you, Lucy, but I hear good stories, bad stories. I hear, oh my God, have you seen this question? Why are we being asked this? So that what you call the woo-woo questions. And really just to kind of discuss experiences. And I know that some of our audience have also kindly shared some of their experiences, which we will share throughout this episode, albeit confidentially with anonymity.
I have to say, I am woo woo. I am a little bit woo woo myself, and I'm always here for a bit of woo woo. But when I've seen these questions, or when people have told me the questions they've had to answer, I've been like, not sure. I'm not sure about that. But I think before we dive into that, there has been some really good moves, definitely, in the application world process,
Yeah.
hasn't there? I think over the last few years, I'm definitely seeing that too. With the kind of easy apply on LinkedIn, I love that, where you can just, and we talked about this in previous episodes, where you can pull together a cover letter and CV in just one document, PDF it, upload it, and then there's your application
Yeah.
sent. Or just email your CV over, have a conversation with a recruiter, or you're working with a recruiter and they kind of do all of that, sometimes that nitty gritty for you. And I think that's worked really well. What do you
Yeah,
think
I
to that?
agree. And I think for me, it's about reducing the friction in the process. So for anybody that works in kind of like a customer facing role, we always talk about trying to have a frictionless even customer experience. And it's the same for a candidate. We should be giving them a frictionless experience because it is a sort of look into what the business is like. So I think you can tell a lot about the type of business you're applying for and the role that you're applying for based on your application process. So, for
Yeah.
example, those very long-winded application processes, so beyond just completing the application form and then going through rounds and rounds and rounds of interview, says to me that they struggle to make a decision. And is
Mm.
that the sort of place you want to work in when you're going through like six rounds of interview plus having completed the job application form and put in a cover letter, and it's a lot of time and effort to then
Yeah.
potentially even get to the end of that process and the role be frozen, or you're unsuccessful because there's been a candidate with more closely matched experience, she says in inverted commas. You know that's one of the things I think businesses need to be thinking about when they're putting in their ATSs, so their applicant tracking systems, which is where most of us would have to go through to do an application, to make it as easy as possible, because you want to give a lovely seamless experience. And unfortunately, there
Yeah.
are tools out there still that do not give that seamless experience. And then particularly if I go back to what we talked about in episode 1 with redundancy and layoffs, there are still lots and lots and lots and lots of people who are having to apply for many, many, many jobs a day, and then building in that
Mm.
friction into that process by, I don't know, clicking on apply button because you found the dream job on LinkedIn. It's not through easy apply, so you click apply, it takes you to the website, you're ready to attach your CV, and then you get that fateful screen that says create account,
Create
email
an
address
account.
and password. And frankly, why? What is the value for the hiring team, the recruitment team? Like, why is it beneficial that a candidate needs to create an account? And if you think about all those
Hmm.
people that have been made redundant applying for multiple jobs, how many accounts have they got? how many passwords are they trying to remember? Like, it's not a good experience. And unfortunately, there is one particular provider who always forces you down that route. And I won't mention who they are, but I'm sure anybody that's done any level of recent applications who has to get to that fateful screen that says email address and password will know who I'm referring to. However, stepping off the soapbox slightly, as you said, Easy Apply is a fantastic option through LinkedIn. Also, Otter, another great job application board. They also have the option to apply through the profile that you create on their account as well. So you don't always have to go on to the end employer's address. So that's quite a nice seamless way of doing it. Other job boards I personally like, or ATSs, I should say, really, rather than job boards, are I like Pinpoint, really easy to use as a candidate, but also as a hiring manager, it's very easy to use. Workable is another one. Again, none of this creating an account business. Bamboo HR and Greenhouse also, very easy to create a seamless candidate experience in all of those. And ultimately, as people who are hiring managers or talent people, you need to be thinking about how you make the process seamless for people who are applying to go and work for your company.
Yeah, I really like Flexa as well. I
yes.
don't know if you've ever come across Flexa. Really like their kind of just the whole user interface that they have, how you can search for jobs, how you can apply for jobs. They have so they're like all about flexible working, remote first. You can select options at the top. You can even select if you want to like take your dog into work as well, which I personally love. And yeah, really great kind of experience, even if it does end up taking you to the company's profile. 9 times out of 10, I've noticed just from conversations and stuff I've applied for in previous years, it's been a very seamless process. So Flex is a great place
I've
to look
also
as well.
come across recently Hacker Job. And so whilst you do have to create a profile with them, what's really interesting is you get assigned like a customer success person as a candidate, and they make sure that your profile's set up for successful businesses to contact you, as well as you being able to apply for roles you've seen advertised on there. So I thought that's also quite a handy one to use, that's sort of a bit more candidate centric. Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of the application tracking systems are not candidate centric. They are hiring or employer centric.
Yeah. Charlotte, when we were like thinking about doing this episode, I actually spent some time reflecting on just my previous experience throughout my whole career when I've applied for roles. And something that two things kind of came up for me, which I thought would be worth kind of mentioning, is that way back when, and it was a while ago, when I first left university and I was applying for kind of, those kind of junior graduate roles, and I was applying for like customer service roles, some of the questions were scenario based. So it would say, customers have replied back to all of this, how would you respond? And at that point, I think that's valid, because right there and then you want to have a look at the CV, look at that person's experience, but also see how they would respond to a customer. So I think the stuff that we talk about, I think when you've got those types of roles, I totally get it. I totally get why you would ask those questions. But if I'm to flip it on its head now, and some of the roles that I've seen or kind of my peers have seen and applied for, some of those questions, and forgive me, this is slightly a little bit of a controversial statement I'm going to throw out here now. I do wonder whether some of it's just a bit, not lazy, I think lazy is a bit harsh, but those questions, some of these questions you'd probably get asked in an interview, in the first interview. So instead of actually having a conversation with someone, they're asking these questions before even getting to kind of an interview round. What do you think to that?
It probably depends on the size of the business in all totality. I think that they are screening a lot more, pre-screening, I guess you could call it, before you even get to having the screening call with the talent person. I think that when they're asking you additional questions like, why are you interested in this role? I think that's totally valid, particularly if they don't give you an option to add a cover letter. or you're one of those people
Yeah.
that don't like writing a cover letter. It's optional, but you've still got an opportunity to show your passion and your enthusiasm and why you think you'd be good for the role. I think what you said about the customer services piece, I think that's also totally valid. For me, the bit where it's less valid is where the questions are a bit, to use your phrase, woo woo.
Yeah.
Also, I think those types of questions can put people off, and they certainly have put me off in the past. And
Yeah.
I might know that I could do a fantastic job. I'm really excited about the company, but as soon as I see something like that, it tells me what sort of culture it is, and you know why, whether it would be an environment I'd like to work in. So I have got a couple of interesting examples I'm willing to share.
Oh, great. Can't
Because
wait to
when I
hear
read
these.
them, I was like, I have to screenshot these because at some point I'm going to have to share this with somebody, because for me, they were just like, you're asking this on an application form. And I just think they're a bit odd. So the first question, would you rather be a jack of all trades or a master of one? Tell us your answer and why. And I kind of think, really? First of all, the phrase is often misused anyway. But also, like, people are going to panic when they see that. They're going to be like, well, oh, I don't know how they're going to want me to answer that. And then that's going to create this level of anxiety. And I just think I didn't like that. It's not the worst one I've read, but I didn't like that. The second one, so it says, some people are pirates and some people are Imperial naval officers. Noting they use the word imperial. On a spectrum between them, which one are you? Why? If neither, how would you describe yourself? So for me, when I read that, I was like, this is a boys' club. This is going to have bro
Yeah.
culture. It also, the fact it references Imperial Britain in it, it's a bit like, this tells me that this is, probably funded through nepotism, and is not something that I'm interested in. And I just thought, or an
Oh,
application
God.
form, like, it's either going to read
No.
that question is going to divide the crowd, right? So obviously for me, I'm like, no. So I've spent all this time, putting in my CV cover letter, answering all their other crazy questions, and I get to that one, and I was just like, I don't want to work in this place. You've really put me off. So actually, it probably
Yeah.
works in some respects because it weeds out the people that don't want to.
Yeah.
But I wish that question had been more visible at the top, where I wouldn't have wasted all my time and effort. But and you think, why? What are these people thinking about when they're putting together these applications? Thinking, oh, that's a great question. It just, for me, I don't like it. I think also that question is going to probably have a gender bias to it, because I don't think most women, I'm speaking very generally, so anybody that disagrees, please feel free to comment. But I don't think most women are going to identify themselves as a pirate or as an Imperial naval officer.
I would have to Google both just to kind of see which category I would fit into. Part of me goes, well, I'll probably be a pirate because I like to be a bit different. Arr.
But you did lend me a book not so long ago called Be More Pirate, and
Yeah,
actually,
be more
what
pirate.
the book's premise is really saying that pirates are quite organised, they're quite democratic, all this sort of stuff. So, maybe I could have used that, but it really turned me off. Do you have any kind of
Yeah.
woo-woo questions that come to your mind?
Yeah, forgive me, I haven't got them like word for word, but they're not really so much woo-woo, but they can definitely kind of stop you in your tracks. So they might say something along the lines of, our values are blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. How would you make sure that you embody these values in our organization? Or there was something recently that somebody was telling me about where they had to basically write a pitch for an idea part of this role was about pulling out some pictures and ideas. Da, 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 da. For how would you help our business and make our business grow? Can you write a little pitch? And I thought that's really cheeky, because what happens if you don't want to like take the person forward but
Yeah,
like their idea? You stole them their idea. I don't know. That's how I thought
I
of
quite
it.
like the
But
values one, though, I have
I
to
don't
say.
like
Like,
them.
as somebody who's quite values
Yeah.
driven, I don't mind answering those types of questions, and I have answered those types of questions. And I think it shows good alignment. But the second
Mm,
question, you're quite right. What if it's a really good idea, but then they don't like the person?
well,
You know, the
I
idea
know.
is not trademarked. So,
A Absolutely, and what I will do, I'm gonna flip it on its head slightly. I just applied, yesterday for to be a Women in Tech
yeah,
ambassador, so Women in Tech Global, to be an ambassador for them, for the UK. And, they did ask a couple of it was just an
yeah.
application form, didn't, like, submit a CV or anything, and it is slightly different, but they did ask some questions around, what would you do? What would you bring? And I get that, because you wanna make sure that you're getting the right person to be in that
Hmm.
space. Because if they're gonna be an
Yeah.
ambassador for Women in Tech Global, you wanna make sure that they are, they have, like, ideas, and they are, lead with innovation, and are women in tech driven, and all about equity and inclusion. So I totally get that. But when it's on like a job application form, sometimes it does personally, it would put me off. But I think it would put me off the most. And I'm saying this because just before we went live, I read somebody's post, and they had did like a little celebration that they had just applied for their 200th
Oh my
job.
God.
And actually, can you imagine if you have to apply for 200 jobs on those, create 200 applications, 200 passwords, 200 times doing. I'm sure it wasn't all of that, but I reckon a good majority of, that's going to drain you. That is going to drain you. And those questions, you're not going to answer them to the best of your ability, because especially if you get to something like that at the end of the day and you're frantically applying for a role and you get to those questions, are you a pirate or are you a naval officer? You're going to get to the point being like, you're not going to write the
No, or you're
best
going to give
thing
up
for
because
yourself,
you're
are
just
you?
like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
can't, I can't be dealing with this.
I give up.
That
Tap me
this
out.
is just, yeah, because as you say, it's sort of very draining. I actually there
Mm,
was one I forgot to tell you about previously, which the role would have included looking after the talent team as well as various other um businesses. And I love this question. I thought it was great. It was like, and finally, can you tell us what you would change about this job application and job description? I thought this is a great question, because obviously of the context of looking after the talent team. But I think that would also put people off because they'd be a bit like, well,
mm,
particularly if they wanted to overhaul the whole thing. And it wasn't, a terrible job description, or, there were a few things that I said, oh, I would have done this and done that, and maybe like consider doing these things. But I thought it was a great question. And where it's relevant, I think they're great. Where it's abstract and a bit ridiculous, like the Imperial Naval Officers and Pirates question, and the are you a master of one or jack of all trades? Like, people don't necessarily perform their best when they're being given
mm.
abstract concepts. And so that also says to me that looking for like an intelligence bias. Um,
Yeah.
so these are just other things that I think, you know, hiring teams need to think about when they're asking these questions. And maybe they're getting
Yeah.
the right outcome by, us saying these things, and, clearly we're not right for these businesses. But, take a minute and think about the candidate experience. And that's what I always come back to, because it's a reflection of you and your business.
Mhm.
Um, but
Agreed.
obviously, the big pet peeve, and it's the thing that we see all over LinkedIn: mandatory fields that don't
I
need to
know.
be
I felt this
mandatory.
coming. Mhm.
So Lucy, what ones are your pet peeves? I've got a long list.
Yeah, I don't like how at the end you've got those, I don't know, I call them diversity and
Yeah,
inclusion questions, I guess. I don't like it when they're mandatory, because I just think it's really none of your
yeah.
business. So some of it was, the ones that I don't like was, it's not worded like this, but did you receive free school meals when
Oh
you were at
yeah.
school? Or were you the first person in your family to go to university?
What
And
profession
and you
did your
have to
parents have
select,
when you were 14?
what profession did your
Yeah,
parents have? What's that about? And then, kind of then, what gender and stuff that you identify with, blah, blah, blah. Those ones I'm not too bothered about, because for me personally, I just kind of click it. But then I don't also like disability, and then that's mandatory now.
yeah,
I've noticed, whether some people don't want to, especially if they've got a hidden
yeah.
disability, they're not going to want to really tell you. whether, you know,
I
it's
mean,
not,
they all
I
give
don't
you
know,
the
it really
option of
gets me.
prefer not to say, but it's just, again, that candidate experience, you having to spend all the time filling it in.
Click, click, click.
And really the what they call voluntary disclosure questions, which is what you've referred to,
That's it.
they're not
Yeah.
voluntary because if they've got that little red star to
They're
say they're
mandatory.
mandatory,
Yeah.
you're volunteering to say I prefer not to say. And essentially what the purpose of these questions are is for the businesses to understand how diverse their talent pool is. But if you're
Mm,
a bit cynical, like perhaps we are they also being used for bias? Now companies will say, no, they're not being used for that. But it's still information and personally identifiable information about somebody. And
yeah.
so personally, I feel like I said that a lot, but I always prefer not to disclose on everything. And it annoys me because I think, yes, there's a time and a place to collect that information. But
Mm-hmm.
before somebody's even had an interview, you're introducing the risk of bias, even though they say no,
Yeah.
it's not.
But I also think from a kind of candidate point of view too, and I've had this not with just people that I've hired, but with friends too, who have said to me, "Oh, on the application form it said something about maybe a
Mm-hmm.
disability, but I didn't want to click it because I didn't want you to think, you know, that I couldn't do my job. I just want to let you know, da 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 da." Or friends go, "Well, I haven't wanted to click this or this because I don't want them to look at that and think, oh, I can't
Yeah,
do the job." So even though you quite rightly say, it's not, you know, technically companies would say it's about, you know, just seeing their talent pool, but I think people still feel, and I think quite rightly, oh, I don't want to say that just in case that goes negatively against me.
yeah, absolutely. Because until we, uh, you know, are able to hire people in an unbiased way, which you know,
Mm,
even with all the great blind hiring software and stuff like that, until
mm,
we've got taken further steps, I just think that there'll be a lot of mistrust around that information. Also, I've noticed that in those voluntary disclosures, and I think it's really lazy of British companies, vet status is only applicable in America.
yeah.
How is this relevant? Like, seriously, don't,
Yeah.
when you're building out your flow, because having worked with
Yeah.
implementing applicant tracking systems before, you can build out the process flow. So if person said they're British, don't ask this question. Like that's surely is part of the flow. I just
Yeah.
think it's really lazy, and and some people won't know what veteran status is. Depending on their experience,
No.
level of job, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that also kind of annoys me a bit because it's just lazy.
Yeah. When I started out my career, I had no idea what that question was about, and I had to look it up or ask somebody. Obviously, now I know because of all the processes and stuff
Yeah,
I've gone through and my experience. But you're quite right. There's stuff that comes up, and also you've just reminded me of something. Just when you click kind of where you're based, your location, but then it still asks you like a question that's not relevant to your location. Like if you're in Northern Ireland,
yes,
for example, there's other questions that you get asked. And I just think, well, I've just told you that I'm British, that that I live in London. So why are you now asking me this question? Oh, it
no,
really
well, you're
bugs me.
absolutely right. And then other mandatory fields. So I've got a list here.
Oh, good. Go for
Prefix
your list.
salutation. Why is it mandatory? Because let's face it, for a man, it's always Mister. But for a woman,
Yeah.
there's a whole plethora. Why is it mandatory that you need to know whether I'm a Mrs. or a Miss or a Ms. Or I think there's MX now as well. And then obviously there are other salutations like Baroness, Reverend, you know, etc. Lady,
Lady.
Lord. I did see a very, very, very long list not so long ago, which just made me chuckle. I did wonder whether if I put one in that wasn't whether they'd say anything. Um, but why is that mandatory? Like, how does that matter? It's such an antiquated thing to have,
Mm,
um, and it's essentially it is a way to understand really whether the woman's married or not. Um, then date of birth. So in the United Kingdom, it is illegal to ask for somebody's age. And when I see it as a mandatory field, I will stop applying. I've tried to buck the system previously and set it to the 1st of January 1900 because that's where all dates start, but sometimes that won't let you push through. But I don't want to give my date of birth. It's not legal for you to ask for it. And then what companies will do is they will thinly veil it with, this is should you be successful, so that we've already got your information ready to send off to our like vetting or background check companies. Well, I haven't even been successful of having my application like approved to an interview, and you want that level of personal information about me? No. So even if it was the best job in the world, if I had that as a mandatory field, I wouldn't continue. And I know there are major retailers that have that on their application form today. And also our beloved NHS also has it on their application forms. And it is risk of introducing bias, and it's age discrimination potentially. So I would never ever fill in an application form that has date of birth as a mandatory field. What do you think?
I've never been really that fussed about it. I don't know if this is the wrong or the right thing to do, and it's very rare for me to like to conform to things, but I think that because it's just been there, I've just cracked on and done it. Until perhaps more recently, when I have applied for stuff, I have put prefer not to say, prefer not to say, prefer not to disclose, whatever. More because now I'm understanding more about DE&I personally myself, and like discrimination and bias, and it's probably more because I've matured and I've grown and I'm more experienced, if I'm honest. Does it bother me? No. Does it annoy me? Yes. More from well, why do you need to know that? And I've just given you everything else. Like, why have I now got to see this? Do you want my blood type as well? Because I don't know what that is, but I might,
But
kind
from
of
a
thing.
GDPR perspective, your date of birth is personally identifiable information, and unless I don't want that floating around in a system for a company that I might not work for several years. And that's really kind of where I'm coming from with it, as well as particularly for the ageism that the older workforce is experiencing. There's lots of stuff at the moment around, why aren't we hiring people over the age of 50? Well, if you're putting something in like that, you're probably screening them out. So whilst it might not bother you as such, I think that you might want to consider the potential implications. That would be my kind of counter to your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, I also haven't been in a position to, kind of side note, where I've applied for lots of roles with that in. So I think if I had, I think I'd have a different view if I was having to give a lot of my personal information out to multiple different platforms. I haven't done that. Whereas I know other people who are watching us, and let us know in the comments if you've had this experience, and let us know your views as well. I would probably be saying something different to you, because I, like you're saying, like, it's my GDPR information. I don't really want, because once someone hacks the information, you know what I'm like, anxious Lucy comes out here. But just I start to perhaps overthink things, whereas I haven't had to do that much. But if I had, I'd probably be saying something different as well.
I mean, I think unfortunately some people, because of the nature of their job, have to apply on those particular application forms. They have to provide that information. But isn't it interesting, because it's illegal to ask for somebody's date of birth, and yet companies are putting it into their application forms and making it mandatory. And to be clear, this is just in the United Kingdom. I can't comment for other countries.
And if you are based in another country, let us know your experience and your view, or if you've worked in other countries before, let us know, because it'd be really, I'm quite curious now to see what's on application forms outside of the UK.
No, that would be really interesting, wouldn't it? So I guess other things to mention is, and I'd love to know your view on this, but I think you tagged me in a post about this the other day, but it's where you have attached your CV, so all of your information is there, and then you get to, so first of all you get to work experience, mandatory, and in the post that you shared with me, and I've seen this several times before and I do it as well, is it then asks you to put in all of your job and work experience even though you've already applied it all in your CV. So I always write, please find in my CV, and I saw that somebody else had done that, because again it's just building in that friction into the process and making it longer than it needs to be. Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. And then the same with education as well.
Oh, don't. It annoys me. I'll be honest with you, that puts me off the
really?
most because it's time consuming. Unless, well, I will say, unless I have uploaded my CV and it has
It's past it.
pre-populated the fields, but I've had to go back through and check it because it, the formatting of your CV, and then suddenly you've got all sorts of woo-woo things going on in there. So you have to like tweak it and change it. But sometimes if it is mandatory, I only put my most recent job role in there, and then I skip through
You're
it.
good. I refuse to do it because it's already in my CV.
But bear in mind, I'm coming from a point of view where I've not been
Yeah.
applying for lots and lots of jobs. But if I had been, I would be like, well, it's in my CV. Well, it's in my CV. But it does annoy me. Don't get me wrong, it still annoys me.
To be honest, even even if I was just applying for one job and I saw it, I'd still write the same thing.
Yeah.
I think again, it's lazy. It's already being provided and served up in a format that somebody has spent a lot of time putting together. And you're right, if it does automatically read it and pass it via your CV, then that's great because that takes away a lot of that manual effort. But 9 times out of 10, it doesn't pass it correctly. And so you're still having to
Yeah.
go in and change stuff. So it's like, for me, one time it's like merged a description of one job with a different job title. So you're still having to go back in and faff around with it. But yeah, that is.
I've just thought
Go
another
on.
pet peeve that has annoyed me in previous lives that I've had is when you've applied, you've filled out the whole application form, created an account, blah blah blah. Then you get an email
Oh,
to say you have an update on your job. So then you have to log into the account and remember like
uh-huh.
what password you used or whatever, and you log in just to get rejected.
That has never happened to me. So I've never experienced that notification. But I can imagine that would
Oh,
be
I love it.
annoying.
Yeah, or like status change on your job application, and then you go in and check it, and it's been like rejected or still pending. And I logged into something. I have to say, I did log into something recently because I applied for a role with a quite big company, and because I'd
Mhm.
already set an account up with them, I just logged straight back in again. And the job that I'd applied for like 4 years ago was still at pending, which made me laugh.
Oh,
That did make me
again,
laugh.
that's just lazy that they haven't closed the
That
loop
is
on the
lazy.
process. It really annoys
I
me.
Considering they are a very big creme de la creme company as well, I'll tell you off air who they are,
Wow.
but, it was quite interesting what it
Yeah.
was. I did laugh, and then I actually decided to not apply for the job after I logged, and I was like, "Do you know what? If you're pending something from 4 years ago, what makes you think you're gonna pend
Well,
this
that
now?" So,
suggests to me
yeah.
that they don't even bother to communicate to say you've been unsuccessful, because that's just as
Yeah.
bad. I guess
Yeah.
one of the other mandatory fields, which again, interested to get your viewpoint, address, personally identifiable
Mm,
information. You're going to give a company your full address
yeah.
that you potentially might not even end up working for. What do you think about that as a
Yeah.
mandatory
I
field?
don't No, I don't like that either, really. Probably more so with the fact that on my CV, I just put locate my location that I'm based in. I don't put my whole full address because you don't really need to know
No,
that. Like, as long as you know that I'm in the commuting distance to the job.
yeah,
Yeah, don't yeah.
yeah. But it's when you get all those boxes that are in these multiple rows.
Oh,
I'm just thinking, oh my god! And then if it's got postcode validation software and you can't even just like make something up,
yeah,
because I
I
just
know.
personally,
Yeah.
again, I don't want to be lots of businesses have all of our information and probably don't even realize how many have them. And thinking about it through a GDPR lens, like, do I really want to
Yeah.
give my personal information again to another business that will hold on to it for up to 3 years? And then out of the blue,
Mm.
in like 2 years, 6 months, you get an email from some company you can't even remember giving that information to, asking you if they can retain your data.
Yeah, I've had that recently as well, and I've gone into them and said, "No,
Yeah, same.
delete," or whatever the thing, to say, especially and it was from the
That's really
company that I
funny.
was just talking about as well, and I was like, "Actually, now you can delete me."
I also
Oh
had a different
gosh.
experience not so long ago where I was sent so I did like a really easy application form, super, really straightforward. And they were like, "Oh, we really liked what you said. We just want to send you, could you complete this form before we have your initial call with the talent team?" So
Yeah.
basically, it's another way of additional way of screening you. So they've gone through the job description and requirements and said, "Do you have X number of years doing this?" So it's like on a Google form. So first of all, it's on
Oh,
a
yeah,
Google
yeah, yeah,
form. So
yeah.
my email address is already populated. First question, email
Mm,
address. That's like, okay. Then you have to put your first name, your surname, and again, all your contact details again, even though they've already been given and you've already emailed me. But yeah, so then there's a series of questions and like, do you have X number of years in this skill set? Do you have X number of years in this skill set? And so it's like they're trying to do additional screening by you saying yes or no.
mm,
And then so I got through like 2 pages of this on a Google form. And then you get to the third page, and then it's when they start asking you like your motivations for doing the job questions, and then some other woo woo questions on top of it. You just think, I'm going to fill all of this out,
no.
and potentially you're still not going to want to speak to me. So actually, what they should have really done is if they needed that level of detail, they should have done a more detailed application form for people to apply in the first place, rather than go down the easy route, which was through Easy Apply on LinkedIn, which is just attaching your
Mm,
CV, because they're going to ask you those questions anyway. So they're just delaying the process, which I thought was interesting.
and also, yeah, I don't know if I like that. I would do it
Yeah,
because, But a friend of mine recently said that she went through this whole application process, had to answer some of those questions, and do a video of
yeah,
herself
I've had to do a
talking
video
about
with her.
answering a couple of questions too. So that's you know, part of me is a bit like, can you just not ring the person up? But I get what they're trying to do here. I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe because I'm a people person, I quite like when I'm hiring and I'm the hiring manager. I like to be able to speak to the person and, because you're not going to get really who they are from watching a video of them, really, especially if they're nervous and especially if they're not natural on camera. Whereas, if I do say so myself, if someone asked me to do a video, I could probably do it because I do these LinkedIn lives. I've been
Mm-hmm.
doing Instagram lives for a long time. I'm a natural camera person. But like some other people, especially my girlfriend that was saying this to me, I thought, you know what, I would. I totally get where she was coming from when she was like, I really don't want to do this. I feel really
I
nervous.
I think so. When I've done the video interview, it's usually they've got like 3 questions they want you to answer, and it's because they want to see your presentation style rather
Yeah,
than anything else. Actually,
yeah.
I think it's quite a good tool, because
Mm.
there's so on the one that I did, this is like many moons ago now, but and I'd never done one before, so I was like, oh my god. But you've got 8 minutes for this question, you've got 10 minutes for this question, and it literally, when it times you out,
Oh,
see, it holds you to time. So
okay.
it's actually a good way to see how much information and how well the information is conveyed in a period of time. It looks at your presentation style, and if you're going for a customer facing job, then I kind of think that it's a good thing.
Yeah, I hear you. I personally still don't like it, but I definitely hear your point, and I'd love to hear in the comments below what your views are. But I definitely hear you. I definitely get your point of view. I think I'm realizing the more and more that we're talking about this, I realize that maybe I'm a little bit stuck in my ways.
But also, it's an inclusive way of hiring, right?
Yeah,
Because for somebody who might be dyslexic and is not great at writing,
yeah,
they have got an amazing opportunity to be able to get to present themselves
yeah,
orally.
yeah. I get you. I totally get your point. I still don't like it.
I suspect that in the future that this will be the way things will go via video and
Yeah,
like paper CVs and application forms will start to disappear.
yeah. And I'm here for that. As long as you don't have to do everything. Like it's either one or the other. And I think that's really maybe that's a little bit harsh of me, but I think just knowing from what people have said who've been watching
Mm,
us, their comments, and especially, that person that I mentioned who applied for 200 jobs, could you imagine if you had to do CV, cover letter, you've just tailored all of that, great,
yeah.
tick. Then you've got to do the application form. Now you've got to do this. Now you've got to do this. Now you've got to do this. To not even maybe even have a conversation, it's it's a lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little
Yeah, I
bit
think
too.
the other thing that I've seen in application processes that's sort of making more of a resurgence is tests.
Yes.
So when I don't know about you, but when I was a graduate, that was to be expected to do those silly tests, which I think personally, I don't think really tells you about somebody's experience. It just tells you about their ability to answer a test in the outcome that you want it, and personality test as well. And there's nothing worse when it's like a scale of like 1 to 4, and it's like, which one are you more, this or this? And I'm like, well, somewhere in between the two. But of
Yeah.
course, that's not how the test wants you to answer. And so again, these sorts of tests are being used to screen people out,
Yeah.
again, before they have a conversation. Um, and we'll talk about this when we get to interviews. But I do think that tasks are a good way to see how somebody works.
Yeah.
Um, but again, that we can cover that in the interviews topic.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
like the test. I don't mind doing the personality one, but then that's because as a coach, I quite like getting the results back and then seeing how that
mhm,
actually aligns. And I've done pretty much every single one that you could name. I've probably done it. And I've had to do one recently and I
yeah.
actually quite liked it. And the lady was like the hiring recruitment person said to me, "Oh, she's like, oh, if you do this, I'll send you the results." And I thought, "Oh, actually, I'll do that because it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to compare the results." But years ago, I had to do I can't even remember, like like it was like a math test plus
Oh,
an English.
psychometric
Yeah,
testing.
those. Mm-mm. I'm not very good in those. I'm not. I'm just not that good at those things. You're not going to get the best out of me from that. And
No,
yeah, nightmare is what I would say.
I agree with you. It's not. It doesn't. It wouldn't reflect my capability in a workplace. It's about
Mm,
your IQ and your ability to answer the question in a certain way,
yeah,
and then it's when it's timed as well. And you
yeah,
think when you couple that with actually filling out an application form, submitting your CV, your cover letter, it's a big ask.
yeah.
Now, obviously, a lot of applications you don't in these processes you're not having to do all of these things.
Mm.
But imagine if you had to do all of those things for every applicant. I mean, it would be soul destroying.
So completely soul destroying. I'm very aware, Charlotte, we've talked a lot about kind of, the job application
Yeah.
form. I just want to quickly add, if that's all right, just
Mm.
around making sure that the audience that are kind of listening and commenting, just around utilizing some of your contacts that you have. And we will talk about more around networks and stuff as we go through the series. But I've found that I've now got a couple of kind of recruitment agencies that I go to specifically, and that cuts out a lot of my kind of having to apply for jobs. Don't get me wrong, apply, fill out application
Yeah.
forms, but most of the time nowadays, I've got a few kind of key contacts for me that actually really helps with that job application process. I don't know what's your view on that.
No, I agree. It's always useful to have some preferred recruitment agencies that you work with that they can put your CV out and give you some advice and some guidance. But I guess for me, the reason I wanted to cover this topic is not everybody has that.
Agreed.
And I
Yeah.
think the majority of people have to go through the process that we've discussed. And I also think that certainly what I've seen over the past 12 to 18 months is that internal talent acquisition, where a lot of these job forms take place, seems to be growing, and less companies seem to be using recruitment agents.
But with what you're saying there, find who those, if there's like a specific company that you'd love to work for,
Yeah.
find who those kind of recruitment folk are and
Mm.
like follow them on LinkedIn, connect with them, send them a message. I've recently just connected with somebody and I'm going through a process at the moment. More on that soon. And it's all because we connected and we had a conversation and yeah, and that's worked for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for everyone, but as you go through your career, especially if you're starting out, as you go through your career, you're going to start to meet and build up your network. Again, we're going to talk around that later on in the series. But yeah, I agree with you, Charlotte, with what you just said. Not everybody has that, but use it as an opportunity now to start connecting with some of your favorite people, favorite brands, and you never know who people are connected to. Even like Charlotte and I, if there's someone that we're connected to, and you're like, oh, I'd really like to speak to this, but let us know. We'll introduce you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you're absolutely right. And I believe we are talking about networking next week.
We certainly are. Can't wait for networking. It's my favourite. It's my favourite
So
topic.
I know you said several
Oh,
times. I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say on the topic. So I think we've exhausted job applications because let's face it, job applications are exhausting. We would love to hear from you guys as to any feedback that you have on this topic, and feel free to use our platform as a bit of a soapbox because we know it's tough, and we've just scratched the surface with some of the things that we've talked about in this episode. However, what I will say is that there are good experiences via job applications, and some of them are, the process itself can take only 2 weeks from just filling in the application form to having a couple of interviews and to securing a role. So I want to leave on that kind of positive note where you've attached a CV, cover letter, you've given your LinkedIn details, you've given your email address, telephone number, and then you get that great email that says, we'd love to talk to you. And so fingers crossed for you all that more and more of you experience that rather than mandatory Fieldgate, and let's create another portal account for you. So Lucy, we'll see everyone next week for networking.
yeah. See you next week.